The empty chairs at Golden Soul restaurant echoed louder than any whispers ever could. Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her mother rearrange the same batch of dishes for the third time, trying to keep her hands busy. The lunch rush should have started 40 minutes ago. Instead, they had 2 tables occupied, both by elderly regulars who probably hadn't heard about the scandal yet. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous email. Your actions have consequences. Think about your family before you talk. The local community Facebook group had exploded overnight. Someone had leaked partial details about the academic integrity investigation, but like a game of telephone, the story had morphed. Now there were rumors about the entire Korean student community being involved in an international cheating ring. Sarah had watched in horror as parents posted about reviewing their children's past group projects with certain students. Sarah, her mother called softly, still arranging pickled radishes that no one would eat today. Maybe you should study at home this week instead of the library. The weight of those words, the protective instinct behind them, made Sarah's throat tighten. Her mother didn't need to explain why. That morning, Sarah had overheard 2 regular customers in the grocery store. I always wondered how a single mother running a restaurant could afford Stanford tuition. Her phone screen lit up with a group chat notification. The student council had called an emergency meeting without her. Her position as academic committee chair now felt like a cruel joke. Below that notification was a message from her sister's middle school teacher, canceling her volunteer tutoring sessions until further notice. Through the restaurant's front window, Sarah spotted Jennifer Park, the student body president, walking past with her mother. Their eyes met briefly before Jennifer quickly looked away, pulling her mother to the other side of the street. The same Jennifer who'd sworn the Honor Society's study materials were completely legitimate, who'd promised Sarah they all used the same resources to maintain their perfect GPAs. Miss Chen. Sarah turned to find Mr. Howard, her AP history teacher, standing awkwardly by the restaurant's entrance. Her heart sank. He'd been her biggest supporter for Stanford. The board is expanding its investigation, he said quietly, glancing at her mother in the kitchen. They're reviewing all AP submissions from the past 3 years. I thought you should know before tomorrow's announcement. 3 years. Sarah's mind raced through every study group, every shared practice essay, every sample paper the Honor Society had distributed. How many others had fallen into the same trap? How many had actually known it was a trap all along? Her mother's voice floated from the kitchen, speaking rapid Korean into the phone. Yes, the loan payment will be late this month. Business is slow, but it will improve. It must. Sarah's phone buzzed one final time. A simple text from Megan, your mother's restaurant. The health inspector's visit tomorrow. It's not a coincidence. The house of cards wasn't just falling. It was being systematically demolished, and Sarah couldn't tell anymore which was worse, being crushed by the collapse, or surviving to see who else would be buried in the rubble. Megan Parker sat cross-legged on her bed, staring at her phone's screen as if it might explode. The screen recording app's red delete button seemed to mock her. This would be the 6th time she tried to erase the footage of Sarah's late-night plagiarism session, and like the previous 5 attempts, she knew her phone would sync with the cloud and restore it within minutes. Just show it to someone, her best friend Rachel had texted earlier. It's eating you alive. But Rachel didn't understand the whole picture. She hadn't spent the last 3 weeks diving into the rabbit hole that had opened up after that night in the library. Megan pulled out her notebook, the old-fashioned paper one she'd started keeping once she realized how deep this went. Her meticulous notes outlined a pattern that made Sarah's plagiarism look like a symptom rather than the disease. The Honor Society's tutoring program, the astronomical fees, the perfectly crafted papers that seemed to materialize for stressed-out students right before deadlines. Megan had even traced payment receipts through a blockchain wallet she'd spotted on Sarah's screen that night, leading to offshore accounts with suspicious transaction patterns. Her laptop pinged with a new email from the Academic Integrity Board. Your presence is requested at the disciplinary hearing for Sarah Chen. Megan's stomach churned as she opened her dresser drawer, pulling out the USB drive she'd hidden there. It contained screenshots of conversations from the Honor Society's private Discord server, messages she'd managed to access using her computer science skills, and an old login shared by her former lab partner. The evidence suggested at least 15 students were involved, including names that would shake the school to its core if revealed. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know you were in the library that night. The society protects its own. Stay quiet." Megan's hands shook as she pulled up the security camera footage from her own front porch, installed after the first anonymous note had appeared in her locker last week. The Honor Society president's car had driven past her house 3 times today alone. Through her bedroom window, she could see the warm lights of the Chen family restaurant across the street. Sarah's mother was working late again, probably trying to keep the business afloat while supporting 3 kids' college dreams. Earlier that day, Megan had overheard Sarah's little sister proudly telling friends that her big sister was going to Stanford and changing their whole family's future. The screen recording notification popped up again. File restored from cloud backup. Megan opened her notebook to a fresh page and began writing. "Dear Dean Matthews." She paused, then deleted it. Instead, she typed out a text to Sarah. "Meet me tomorrow. Alone. There's something bigger going on, and you need to know what it is." The reply came almost instantly. "I can't. They're watching." Megan looked at her phone screen one more time, then at the restaurant across the street. "Not as closely as I've been watching them," she whispered, and began to formulate a plan. The abandoned journalism room smelled of dust and old paper, its walls still plastered with faded newspaper layouts from stories long forgotten. Sarah's footsteps echoed as she navigated between obsolete printing equipment, following Megan's texted instructions to meet at the back of the room. The irony of discussing academic dishonesty in a space once dedicated to truth-telling wasn't lost on her. "You came alone." Megan's voice emerged from behind a towering filing cabinet. "They think I'm at my counselor's office." Sarah clutched her phone, screen displaying the latest message from Marcus Wong, the Honor Society president. "Last chance. Meeting at 4 p.m. My father's investment offer stands." Megan stepped into view, laptop open in her arms. "Before you make any decisions, you need to see this." She turned the screen towards Sarah, revealing a spreadsheet that made Sarah's breath catch. Payment records, dates, names. 3 years' worth of the Honor Society's academic assistance program laid bare. "How did you?" "I'm in AP Computer Science for a reason," Megan cut in. "But that's not the important part. Look at the payment patterns." She scrolled through the data. They target students with the most to lose: full-ride scholarship candidates, first-generation college applicants, children of immigrant business owners. Sarah's hands began to shake. "The health inspection at my mom's restaurant tomorrow." Marcus's father sits on the local business council. Yesterday, he filed 6 health code complaints against Korean-owned businesses in the district. All of them have children in AP classes. The weight of understanding settled over Sarah like a lead blanket. She sank into a dusty chair, her mother's worried face flashing through her mind. "They're not just selling papers, they're selling protection. And collecting leverage," Megan added, pulling up another document. "Every client has to submit personal essays first, supposedly for style matching. But really, blackmail insurance." Sarah finished, feeling sick. "They have everyone's original work, proof of what we agreed to." The journalism room's old clock ticked loudly, counting down the minutes until Marcus's meeting. Sarah's phone buzzed again. "Your mother's restaurant. Your sister's middle school recommendation letters. Your cousin's visa renewal. We can help with all of it. Or not." Megan closed her laptop. "The academic board hearing is in 3 days. I have everything documented, but I need your testimony to verify it. We can expose the whole system and destroy how many families in the process." Sarah's voice cracked. "You don't understand. It's not just about me anymore. I understand better than you think." Megan pulled out a final piece of paper, her own acceptance letter to MIT's computer science program. 3 years ago, my sister was in the same position you're in now. She chose to stay quiet. The price of that silence." Megan's eyes hardened. "She's still paying it. They never let you stop paying it." The clock struck 3:45. Sarah had 15 minutes to decide. Take the deal that would save her family, but trap them forever, or risk everything to break a system that had ensnared generations of desperate students before her. Her phone lit up one last time, not from Marcus, but from her little sister. The Honor Society president's brother just offered to help with my high school applications. Isn't that nice? 1 year later, Golden Soul Restaurant buzzed with a different kind of energy. The walls, once decorated with generic landscapes, now displayed framed newspaper articles. Local high school's revolutionary approach to academic integrity and student-led reform changes educational culture. At the center was a photo of Sarah and Megan testifying before the State Education Committee. Sarah adjusted her Yale Education Department lanyard as she watched students fill the restaurant's new community room, a space her mother had created by converting their storage area. Every Wednesday, the room transformed into what the local paper had dubbed the Honesty Hub, where students could discuss academic pressures without judgment. Ready for your speech? Megan asked, looking up from her laptop where she was finalizing their presentation for tomorrow's school board meeting. Their pilot program had reduced academic dishonesty by 78% across 3 local high schools, and districts across the state were taking notice. Almost, Sarah replied, watching her sister Jin guide a group of middle schoolers through her newly developed peer tutoring program. The same kids who'd once been part of the Success Circle were now proudly wearing badges that read Academic Integrity Mentors. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the Truth in Academic Progress app, the platform she and Megan had developed during their gap year, funded by a grant from the state's Educational Innovation Fund. Another student had anonymously reported feeling overwhelming pressure. Within minutes, 3 peer counselors had already responded with support and resources. Mrs. Chen, a freshman, called out, "Can we get more of those amazing stress relief dumplings?" Sarah's mother emerged from the kitchen, her smile wider than it had been in years. The restaurant's study break specials had become legendary, turning what could have been financial ruin into unexpected success. Every table was filled with students, parents, and teachers, sharing not just meals but honest conversations about grades, pressure, and mental health. Marcus Wong's father's conviction had made national headlines, leading to investigations at schools across the country. But it was the positive changes that made Sarah proudest. The Honor Society had been replaced by subject-specific study groups where collaboration, not competition, was celebrated. Their school's college acceptance rates hadn't dropped, but student anxiety levels had plummeted. "Look who's here," Megan nudged Sarah, pointing to the door where Dean Matthews entered with a group of educators from neighboring districts. "Still hard to believe," he said, approaching their table, "that what started as a disciplinary hearing turned into a model program for academic reform. Yale's lucky to have you both next fall." Sarah touched the acceptance letter in her pocket, not just to Yale's education program, but to their prestigious Educational Policy Fellowship. Her personal statement, titled The Price of Silence, had earned her a full scholarship. "Annie," Jin called out, waving a paper triumphantly. "I got a B+ on my history test, my first non-A, and Mom's actually proud." Their mother beamed, setting down a plate of dumplings. Proud because she worked hard, learned much, and did it honestly. Sarah stood up, gathering her notes for tomorrow's board meeting. Their data showed that when schools prioritized learning over grades, both improved naturally. But it was the statistical drop in student anxiety, depression, and stress that really told the story of their revolution. "Sometimes," she said to the room full of students, educators, and parents, "the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of courage, like choosing truth over silence, healing over hiding, and real learning over empty perfection." Outside, the sunset painted the sky in shades of hope, while inside, the next generation of students learned that their worth wasn't measured in grades, but in the courage to be authentically, imperfectly, themselves. Sarah Chen's phone buzzed in her pocket as she sat in the waiting area outside Dean Matthews' office. The notification preview made her heart skip. "Congratulations from Stanford Admissions." Her finger hovered over the message, trembling. But before she could open it, the dean's door swung open. "Miss Chen, please come in." The dean's office felt smaller than she remembered from her student council meetings. Natural light streamed through tall windows, highlighting dust motes that danced in the air, the same dust that seemed to coat her throat, making each breath more difficult than the last. Dean Matthews didn't take his usual seat behind the massive oak desk. Instead, he stood by a sleek laptop connected to a wall-mounted display screen. "I imagine you know why you're here," he said, his tone carrying none of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to during their academic planning sessions. Sarah's carefully rehearsed defense dried up in her mouth as he pressed a key on the laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing a split view: the university library study area on the left, and a close-up of her own laptop screen on the right. The timestamp read 2:47 am, just 3 days before her history paper was due. Sarah watched in horror as her past self frantically toggled between browser windows, one displaying an obscure academic journal article from 1987, the other her Word document filling up with copied text. "This recording," Dean Matthews said, pausing the playback, "was submitted anonymously to the Academic Integrity Board yesterday morning. The metadata confirms its authenticity." He finally sat down, placing a manila folder between them. "Would you like to see the similarity report between your paper and Dr. Ainsworth's 1987 publication on the socioeconomic impacts of the Korean War?" Sarah's phone buzzed again in her pocket, probably the full Stanford acceptance email. The irony made her feel sick. She started, but the dean wasn't finished. He opened the folder, revealing not just the similarity report but screen captures of her browser history, her documents edit log, and, most damningly, her payment receipt from an academic assistance website. "Miss Chen, your paper isn't just plagiarized. It appears to be part of a larger pattern of academic dishonesty that the board is currently investigating." He leaned forward, his expression shifting from disappointment to concern. "Several other students have been implicated. You're the first one we're interviewing." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Other students. A larger pattern. Sarah's mind raced through every interaction she'd had with the Honor Society members who'd helped her find research materials. The same Honor Society she'd been guaranteed admission to next semester. Her phone buzzed a third time. This time, it wasn't Stanford. The text simply read, "Keep quiet about the society. We're handling it." Dean Matthews was still talking, outlining the disciplinary process, but Sarah barely heard him. She was too busy watching her carefully constructed future crumble and wondering who else was about to fall with her